and insane smiles. Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum, one of the co-founders of The Blaze. And today, my very special Friday frontliner is Kate Christensen. Hi, Kate. I'm so happy to have you back.
Hi, Jenna. It's so good to be back. It's nice to talk to you again.
Please keep writing books so that you can keep coming back to The Blaze and we can catch up like every 4 years or so,
Okay.
right? I think the last time you were on, I feel like it was in summer of 2020, because I remember just being like really high from talking to you because I meant to talk to you about your book, and instead we were talking about like food the whole time.
We talked about Norwegian food, as I recall. Aren't we both Norwegian?
We are both Norwegian. I'm half Norwegian German and then half Jewish, so I have like
I'm not Jewish. I wish I were, but I feel like there's a Venn diagram of Jewish food and Norwegian food. I was just talking. Look, I'm talking about food again already.
I know. I was like, I shouldn't have thrown out that tasty tidbit because this is what we're going to talk about. But we can talk about food. I'm always happy to talk about food. There is some food in the new book. But I think before we start talking about food, what I'm going to do is welcome everybody to The Blaze. And we see somebody is here from Southeast Florida. Thank you, Renee, for taking time away from your beautiful day. And Kate, you're in Taos now, right?
Yeah.
How did this happen? Like, you were right up the street from me in New Hampshire, and I somehow managed to not get out there to see you.
I know. I was there for a long time. We were in Maine. We had a house in Portland, Maine for 10 years. And my husband's a screenwriter. I was ready to stay in Maine for the rest of my life. Not only did I write a novel about Maine, but I feel like it was a sense of home that I've never had before coming to Maine. And leaving it was wrenching, but I did it for love. And I'm glad I did, because Taos is great. And my husband is so much happier here, which means we're all happier. And you can see the sort of, I'm trying to show you my ceiling. It's like the Viga ceiling, which is really cool. I love the architecture here too. But what I love most of all is, besides the sense of community, is hiking.
Oh, so jealous.
Yeah.
An avid, mad hiker. And I know you have dogs also. Are there snakes and scorpions that the dogs have to watch out for?
There are rattlesnakes, but we've only seen a couple of them. The snakes we've seen have been benign and sort of sunning themselves and not really a threat. But luckily, my dogs don't care about snakes. They see a snake, they ignore it. So I don't worry too much about snakes.
Yeah, I imagine that was probably like a little bit of a concern just at first, because my dog Henry would be like, "Lady, what is that peculiar stick?" Like, we have seen snakes in the woods here in Massachusetts, and he'll poke it with his nose and think it's just a very weird moving stick. So, and Renee wants to know what kind of dogs you have, which is a great question.
I mean, one of them is at my feet right now. She actually likes butt rubs, so she like shoves her butt in my hand, which is, I mean, she's a dog. I have 2 mutts, and they're about 45 pounds. And one of them is from the Florida Panhandle. He's a Carolina dog. He's like an orange dingo. And the other one is from the Navajo Res in Arizona. She's a sheep herding dog without any sheep to herd. So in other words, she's the boss of us.
She herds people.
She also, when she was a puppy, we were hiking in the Arizona desert, and there was a herd of cows standing in our way on the trail. She was a puppy. We had just gotten her. And she ran up to the cows, and she was basically like, "I'm going to need you ladies to go over there under that tree because you're in our way." And they went. It was amazing.
Oh my gosh. Working dog.
Yeah.
That's a very cool thing. My dog is ostensibly a working dog, and my vet once scolded me for having a lab who wasn't out, fetching birds. I'm like, but we live in the city. I work him as much as I can in the woods. Okay, I have to welcome everybody to The Blaze, which I didn't do, but welcome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Blaze. I'm Jenna. I'm one of the co-founders of The Blaze. If you like what you see here, please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. We actually just started broadcasting to Instagram, on Twitter, which I refuse to call X. We are ubiquitous. Please consider signing up for our newsletter at www.mightyblaze.com. And we bring you your favorite authors in your living room on digital platforms, so you don't even have to wear pants to see all the people whose books you love to read. There. Boom. Okay. So welcomed. And now I'm going to introduce our guest. In addition to her dogs, she has many other things going for her, namely books. And I'm going to read your first person bio from your website because I think that's so refreshing. Like, I love the first person bio. So, you ready for your own words?
Yeah, hit me. I forgot what I said.
I know, right? When I get introduced to him, I was like, who is that? So, yeah, I know there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance there, but okay. So, here's what I'm going to write. You can tell me if it's true or not true. Okay. My co writer, Eliza Wolf, and I recently finished writing The Tarot Sisters, the first book of a YA trilogy with Disney Books. True? True. Exciting. Do you read tarot?
You know, I knew nothing about tarot when I started the project. It was sort of a brainchild of Melissa de la Cruz, who's a kind of powerhouse for Disney Books, and my agent, Richard Abate. They came up with this idea, came to me with it. I said, I know nothing about YA. I know nothing about tarot, but okay, I'm game. But can I write it with my friend? And my friend, Melissa Henderson, may or may not use the pen name Eliza Wolf, is she knows YA, but she's great. Anyway, I knew we could do it together. So I've never co-written anything before. We finished the first book. It's coming out in the fall of 2025, and we are fomenting the second one. So I think it's going to be about the Underground Railroad. We'll see.
I love this. These are two of my favorite topics, actually, tarot, which I do read. And then the Underground Railroad. I actually think you can't really see it that well, but one of the closets behind me in this 1860s building in Boston, I'm convinced was used for Underground Railroad because the closet is like a Narnia closet that goes all the way back and back and back. It's like a series of 4 closets. And I'm convinced that there are people who stayed.
I bet you're right. I bet you're right.
Yeah. So you write the book and you foment and write, and I will just have the fantasy about it, and then I will read. Okay. So that's coming. Your first detective novel to be published under a pseudonym, interesting, is also in the works at HarperCollins. Fingers crossed for a series. True? Not true?
True. It's coming out this summer, which is
Ooh.
so exciting, and I'm about to start another one.
Ooh.
This whole foray into genre for me is, I feel like now that I'm over 60, I feel like I get to do whatever the hell I want.
Wait, you're
And
over 60? Can we pause for a moment and just be like, how are you over 60? Are you a vampire?
No.
Am I drinking blood?
No, I hesitated to answer that because I was thinking of a joke I have with my husband, who's 20 years younger than me, that I suck his blood at night. But I mean, TMI? I don't know.
No, this is the blaze. Bring it on. Everybody wants to know about this. This is worth the price of admission right here, folks. But yes. And we all want to know, like, A, about the genre leap, and B, your 20-year younger husband. Like, everybody here wants to know about that. But I'm going to continue your bio, and then I will ask all those nosy questions. Meanwhile, I'm currently at work on a new novel, working title Good Company.
Also true.
You are busy.
I am so busy. I feel like, first of all, I got sober 5 years ago. And second, I went through menopause and all the hormones went away, including all the mood swings and the brain fog and all of it. And post-menopausal life is fantastic. I feel this sort of upwelling of creative juice that this kind of fertility, weirdly, this like creative fertility that I've never felt before, maybe since before I went through what's it called? Adolescence. It was so long ago, I can hardly remember. But this sort of clarity of mind, and I don't give a damn anymore about anything except all these ideas in my head, and I just want time, basically, here in this new phase of my life, which is kind of exciting.
I love this. I'm writing this down since I do tend to forget things. I'm writing down all these questions, even though I already have a list of questions, but the questions that you're inspiring are much more interesting than the questions that I had. So I want to ask about this postmenopausal creative fertility because everything we hear about menopause is always negative. And a lot of us going through this experience or perimenopause find it to be a very wrenching physical and emotional and spiritual process. So I will definitely ask about that. Let's go to your previous 7 novels. I've published 7 novels, including The Great Man, which won the 2008 Penn Faulkner Award for Fiction. And most recently, before this novel, The Last Cruise, I've also published 2 food-centric memoirs. Not going down that path right away, but I'll ask about food, Blue Plate Special, and How to Cook a Moose. which won the 2016 Maine Literary Award for Memoir. I have taught fiction at the Iowa Writers Workshop and have published essays, reviews, and stories in many publications and anthologies. And as we have established by your stealing, you live in Taos, New Mexico with your husband, 20 years younger. You heard it here first, and 2 dogs. And today, Kate is here to talk about her 8th novel and her 10th book, Welcome Home. I'm not doing this right. Welcome Home, Stranger, which I loved and which actually touches upon many of the topics that we have been discussing in our sort of informal preamble here. So put my glasses back on and be official. Can you describe for your audience who hasn't read Welcome Home, Stranger yet, what the book is about?
Well, this gets me right back to the topic of menopause, because and I really do want to thank you for Vanna Whiting the cover so beautifully.
You're welcome. My job is my job. I practice. So.
I love it. Can you just like maybe just, it's like a hand dance around my book. It's really lovely.
Thank you.
When I started the book, thank you, Renee Herskowitz. I wrote the book during a time of going through the knothole of menopause, the beginning of the Trump administration, the years leading up to and including the beginning of quarantine and the pandemic, a dark time for me and for the country. And I was experiencing a lot of loss. My longtime editor retired, and I wasn't sure I was ever going to publish another book. This one wasn't working. We were still living in Maine. We were in lockdown in New Hampshire for almost 2 years, a year, in the middle of nowhere in the New Hampshire countryside, me and Brendan, my husband, and our dogs. And luckily we all like each other's company. It did not turn into The Shining. So that wasn't part of the darkness. That was actually the thing that saved me, was writing, and also the fact that Brendan and I, he is 20 years younger than me, really like each other's company and are perfectly happy just sort of alone. So that was not part of what inspired the book. What inspired the book was all sorts of other losses I was feeling. A sort of, the disintegration of our once stable democracy, and this falling apart and polarization of our society. And also internally, menopause is an existential crisis in a way. It's sort of like, who am I now as a postmenopausal woman? And as you're going through it, you're sort of wondering, what am I becoming? It's like adolescence in reverse. And adolescence freaked me out. I mean, it was so long ago, it's hard to remember. I feel like adolescence and coming of age are literary topics that have been widely explored, are incredibly respected as topics of seriousness, girls becoming women. But when you go through it in reverse, it's kind of a joke. I mean, it's sort of like we're so awkward around menopause. Rachel, my narrator, Rachel Calloway, is a climate journalist, and she makes the connection on page 1 between, and this is the primary existential crisis I was feeling, was climate change and the catastrophic devastation of our ecosystem that we have brought about, and that has been written into all our mythologies, into the Bible, into, it's sort of like we feel this inevitability about the apocalypse. And, every generation says it's the apocalypse and it's the end times and whatever. But there is now scientific evidence that suggests that we may be living through some sort of catastrophic end of something. And so this was a sort of parallel that I wanted on page 1. I wanted it, I wanted the death of her mother to sort of kick off this existential crisis in her that's external and internal. And she's a climate journalist. She's going through menopause. Her mother has just died. And so she has to go home to Maine, a place she left 10 years ago and never really wanted to go back to, for reasons that the book gets into. So it's a thorny little knothole that my narrator is in, and it was a thorny little knothole that I was in when I was writing it. And so I wanted to use her as a sort of avatar in the world of the book to ask these questions, like, how do you go on in the face of all this? How do you go on personally? How do you go on as a country, as a society? And who are we? And what is our role once we aren't plausibly fertile? I never had kids. So it wasn't even about that. It wasn't about procreating, the whole menopausal question. It was more about identity. It was more about like, okay, when I was young, I was very aware of how I looked. And not that I'm not anymore. Of course, we all are. We have to be. But it's different now. And so one of the things I also explored in the book was this question of invisibility and how you become sort of invisible. You realize that the younger women are taking the stage and that you are part of the audience now. And that's a really interesting adjustment to make. So all of these things were boiling in me when I was writing the book, and all of these questions were demanding to be asked and answered in the form of all these things I throw at Rachel in the course of the book. So yeah, I mean, that's a very long answer to your question, but this book had, for a 200-page book, it had a lot of questions in it. And at one point it ballooned to almost 500 pages.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and then I put it away and wrote the detective novel. I was just like, this isn't working.
There's so many big topics in it, and there's so much loss that I'm not surprised that the book ballooned to 500 pages. And honestly, every book I write starts out as over 500 pages, and we're like 800 pages, and then I go back and pare it down, and it grows and shrinks, like an accordion. But it is a book that packs a lot into a small space. And I have so many questions about what you just said. First of all, I think you look beautiful. And when we were in the green room, we were talking about I was going to put my hair back like Kate's because I could be a Kate fangirl now. And she has this beautiful streak. And do you want to tell our audience, apropos of what we were talking about, what this is called?
Yeah. Well, you called it the money streak, right? The money, what's it called? The money
My
streak?
stylist says if you have like these white pieces or lighter pieces of hair by your face, they're called the money pieces, which I think sounds very porny, but whatever. That's what she
No, I
calls
love it. Oh, I'm going to call it that from now on. But my
it.
youngest sister told me that when young women have this, or maybe it's the side things, I can't remember, they're called estrogen locks, which I think is really interesting. I don't know where she got that. She could have made it up. If she's watching this, Emily, chime in.
Yeah, she's or anybody chime in. What are these called? It's sort of interesting. Like I think about this a lot as a woman, as a blonde. Like I'm a naturally blonde woman. When I was a kid, I had this white blonde, Norwegian hair, and just sort of
It's
maintained.
beautiful.
Thank you, and it like my stylist will thank you for that too because it's like darker. But I think about these things a lot as a woman in her 50s. Like will I continue to do this forever? Will I continue to be vain forever? Like, I like a certain amount of vanity. To me, it invites self care where you're like, what is my body doing? What is happening to it? And what weird, effed up thing is age doing to it today? Where you wake up and there's like a line on your face that literally was not there the day before, or something does not work that did work the day before. And I think about all of these things quite a bit because I'm forced to. And I think that to me is the insult of aging is not necessarily that we age, like age is a privilege denied to many, but the fact that it is done without consent in the same way that when you're a girl, your adolescence is done without your consent. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, what is driving my body today? Like, where did these boobs come from? Like, what's happening? It's all very fast in a way that men don't have to deal with, although they have a slower declination, I think, or a different process. But we suddenly are like falling off the cliff, which is astonishing to me. So one of the things that I loved about Welcome Home Stranger, I'll do the hand dance around it again, is that it confronts this topic head on and examines some of the strangeness of being at an age where society considers you discardable, and yet you still have a 50-year lifespan ahead of you if you're lucky to enjoy the world. And I wanted to read a couple of passages that I had underlined. Like I do this, like I mark up all my books when I love them. And the first one is about Rachel looking at a group of girls in a restaurant who are in their early 20s. Three women in their early 20s sit with their heads together in exuberant self absorption, punchy and raucous. All of them as fresh and provincial as this bar, pretty young Maine girls, just like I used to be. They might not see me, but I see them, their innocent, arrogant power and youth, the joys of being glossy and fertile. I love that combination. All their major mistakes and disappointments, compromises and missed opportunities still to come, unimaginable to them now. And I was so struck by that because I have sometimes this envy of the 20 somethings not for being 20, because I actually like my life better now. I like the way I look better now. I don't have that terrible lost questioning feeling that I did then. The ambition, all I ever wanted to do was be a writer, and like thinking that I would kill somebody to make that happen, like that burning furnace. Like now I think, okay, I can take a pause. Like we did this thing, right? We did the thing. But what what are your feelings and what are Rachel's feelings about leaving that 20 something era behind? And like, what is the superpower of being this age, if there is one or several?
I think she uses the word superpower to describe the invisibility. It's a shocking sort of readjustment. But once you realize you're invisible, this has been happening to me more and more lately. Here in Taos, I have a whole group of friends who are all different ages. And so I find myself in a room full of people ranging in ages from, their 20s to almost 80, and friends and equals, and sort of all hanging out and having a conversation. So the invisibility factor doesn't really hit me here so much.
Mm.
I don't know, but I just taught at the Iowa Writers Workshop last fall, and it was amazing. My students were in their 20s mostly. I had a student, a woman who was 31, who felt old. And I was like, 31 is so young. You're so young. But she felt old in the context of the workshop. But being among these much younger writers, I really felt my age in ways I think that were inspiring for me, but also like a wake-up call, realizing how, like you said, there's that furnace of ambition in your stomach, that fire in the belly when you're in your 20s, and that sort of that purity of belief in your work, and am I going to make it? I will kill someone. Exactly. I will kill whoever it takes to publish books. And being among that, I felt like an old war horse. I felt like I could fade into the background of their conversation. It wasn't about me at all. It's about them and who they are becoming and what their work is. Um, but I also felt like I had, and this word is so, it's so like Gladys the orca, but I felt that I had wisdom. Like I really have learned a lot. And for me, that's a superpower, that the accretion of decades of mistakes and screw ups and bad decisions and good decisions and achievements and just sort of everything that makes a life. All this sediment is, I have it now to draw from, and it's like a rich larder. Just to use a food analogy, just to throw one in there for fun, but it's like a very rich kind of panoply of, it's like I have all that. It's like I've earned it. It's like this sense of, I've lost a lot. I've gone through a lot. I've worked really hard. I've written a lot of books. I have this weight of experience that to me outweighs the joys of being glossy and fertile by far, by exponentially. If I could stay in my 60s forever, I think I would. I don't think there's any age I've liked ever as much as 61. I think um, it's a sense of having years ahead of you, but also, and I'm still plausibly strong. Things I know exactly what you mean about the indignities of aging. And the funny thing about aging is, hi, Suzanne. Suzanne's here. Suzanne Finnemore, great writer. The funniest thing about aging to me is that I catch myself thinking, like I did when I was young, like, oh, it'll heal.
Yes, yes, totally. And thinking, oh, but I need to treat my body in a different way for that to happen. I spent, I think, like the first 50 years of my life doing things to my body to make it look the way I thought it should look. right? To like sort of maintain that glossy and fertileness. And I would still like to look glossy and fertile forever, whether I am or not. But I feel like the second half of my life, I get to care for my body as a way in which I get to be carried through the world and to really learn to respect it and nurture it in a different way. And I really love that. And I no longer take for granted the fact that I can get out and walk around and hike or do new physical adventures. Like I want to go zip lining this year. I'm learning to cross country ski very badly. I still need somebody to come pick me up when I fall on my back. So, what is the most surprising thing that you learned? Or like, what is the most, I'll give you a choice here, surprising or enduring thing that you learned in the larder? Like, what do you have in there?
You know, I don't have a ready answer for that, but so I'll tell you the first thing that came into my mind. I've always been made fun of all my life for being a Pollyanna, for sort of making the best of things and, everything's fine. And it's something I got from my mother. She had a lot of hardship and she taught us by example to go on, just go on in the face of everything. I feel like that is the most valuable lesson of my entire life. I feel like in addition to feeling this upwell of experience, I feel like I'm glad I was a Pollyanna. I'm
Mhm.
really, I mean, I feel like being optimistic in the face of everything is part of what this novel is getting toward. And it's getting toward a sense of things may not last. You may lose a lot. You may not be the person you were in ways that are hard for you. And by you, I mean me. Um, and this in the face of the sense of diminishment, I think finding joy and comfort in what is new and sort of, seeing it as an adventure, which is kind of how I've approached my entire life as an adventure. It serves you well in old age. It sort of keeps like, why not go ziplining?
Mhm.
Uh, you could, or like, why not climb that mountain? So, like, today, I was hiking earlier and, with my husband and dogs, and we were out on the mesa, and it was 18 degrees with, I think, a wind chill factor of down to 0. It was really, really cold, and I was underdressed.
Mhm.
And instead of sensibly going back to the car, I just kept going. I was like, "No, I am out in the Arctic and I am an explorer." Finally, my husband was like, "You need to turn around. We need to go back to the car." But anyway, that's sort of I don't say this lightly. I think it's something I want. It's a way I want to feel into my 90s, I think.
Mhm.
Sort of, "Oh, what's next?" Like, "Oh, and what will happen now?" And
I
I'm
love
curious.
that. Sorry, go ahead. I stepped on
I'm
you.
just curious to find out, and also in the face of all this impending doom that we're greeted with in the news, like every freaking minute on our phones, you can wake up and doom scroll at any point at night. And insomnia is another new treat of older age. Um, but in the face of all that, I think it's the only sane and rational response, and I really mean this. Like, we can choose how we respond to all this. We can choose despair, we can choose despondency and paralysis, or we can choose a kind of adaptation and curiosity and a kind of, love of community. Again, not to sound like Gladys the orca, but she's my personal hero these days.
I love that. And the curiosity, the sense of adventure, the choice that you have about what you see around you and what you're experiencing. I love all of this. I'm also glad you're a Pollyanna. I am a I have a weird combination of like epigenetic doom from like my Jewish side of the family where I'm like, okay, we're all going to die at any moment, so I need to be prepared.
No,
And
but
at the
that's
same time,
true. That's
it's
actually real.
always true, right? But I also
Yeah.
feel in the face of that feeling like, yeah, I like to be prepared and have many escape hatches in every way. But also, I do feel like, what is the point of wasting the life that we have? And I think you're giving us such good pointers about how to maintain that joy, which is curiosity and adventure and sort of choosing positivity and not toxic positivity, but like accepting sort of like radical
Yeah.
positivity, right?
Yeah.
if I had to, like, I was asking myself the same question, even though I'm supposed to be interviewing you, like, what do I have in my larder of wisdom, so to speak? Like, what's in those mason jars? And one of them is I would tell my younger self, my 20 something, glossy, fertile, hugely anxious, burningly ambitious, very unhappy in many ways, and yet totally joyous self. I would say it's all going to be okay. Like it's going to be okay. You're going to get the thing you want. So you don't have to be such a freak about it. Like you don't actually have to drive over people on the street, just like do your work, but you can enjoy things a little more. And also, there are a lot of different ways to live, and they're all okay unless you're like Trump, I mean, but like if you're not out there actively committing bad acts, then like they're all good ways to live. And I think about this a lot as a fellow writer who didn't have children because of my career. It was a very deliberate choice. We have a great comment in the chat that I want to read as well. But I think a lot these days, watching many of my friends go through the empty nest process of what Toni Morrison said about not having children, and how when she was watching her friends go through that process, she wasn't fretting because she knew who she was and she could work, and she'd always had to work. And I thought, for the first time in my life, like, I sort of faintly regret not having children, because I think I would have made good people and I would have liked to know them. I think they would have been interesting people. But
Same.
I chose this, right? And so I think, but I've always had the work. And for me, the transition is, sorry, Henry, the transition is more about my sense of aging in a world that feels uncertain than it is about that kind of life shift. And Rachel in Welcome Home Stranger says, I'm afraid that without my job, I won't fully exist. My work is all I have my whole life. Without it, who am I? And I was really curious about that, because it really struck me. Like, if I didn't have my work, who would I be? So if you didn't have your work, who would you be?
Yeah, I've always asked that question too. I work because I am. I write because if I don't write, I don't know who I am. And I write to save myself. And in this time of darkness, I wrote this book, and that was my way out of the darkness. And it often is. I think all my novels, all my books have a question at their heart that I need to answer. And the only way to answer it for myself is by writing. And I guess writing is called work. And it is work. I mean, not to make light of this, it is a really, really hard work. But I've always written, and I always, I call myself a workaholic. I call Rachel a workaholic, but I think that's like an easy catch. It's like a shortcut to a really deep kind of identity, which is centered in being productive and sort of doing something that has profound meaning for yourself, that may be selfish, that may be pointless, that may be, a lot of things. But the act of doing it, it's I have a sister who is a yogi, and she has a yoga center in Amsterdam. And from her many years ago, I learned the term life yoga. And it that has resonated with me in many
What
ways.
is that? What is life yoga? Pay attention, everybody.
Well, again, I'm quoting my sister, and I don't think she's here to like defend herself. So I'm probably going to get it wrong. But I think life yoga isn't yoga. Life yoga is doing something that is giving and productive and also selfless in a way, which kind of goes against the idea of writing as selfish. But I also feel like it's kind of life yoga. It's kind of a sense, because I'm writing to connect. Most of all, I'm writing out of a sense of solitude and loneliness into the world of readers, and definitely writing for readers. More than I'm writing to be published, I'm writing to be read. And by read, I mean to connect with other people who feel some of the things I do. And no one's books are for everyone. I think I mean, sometimes I go on Goodreads and I look at great novels to see what their average stars are, and most great novels have a 3.5. Think about that. I mean, all books are not for everyone, but I feel like, and maybe you feel this too, like your readers are sort of, it's like you're not writing in an echo chamber. It's a sense of I'm speaking to people I don't know and may never meet, but, um, interesting life yoga. I'm liking your comments, Renee. Um, um, if anyone knows more about life yoga, please, chime in and define it, like estrogen locks, like
Uh-huh. Our producer says it sounds amazing, which it totally does. And I would like to say that Suzanne says, I'm listening to Welcome Home Stranger on Audible, and it's a revelation. So you guys go get your audiobooks now. Yeah, I love the idea of the life yoga, and also the reason we write. And I'm sorry I threw that up there because I couldn't resist like seeing the comments. They're so great and participatory. But I literally just said in a memoir class I taught the other night that the reason we do this, whether we're hiding our persona in fiction or we're, lifting our skirts to show our underpants because that's what memoir is, either way, the reason that we do this is to connect across the void. And the void is between one human being and another human being. You may never know where your words land, but the whole point is to help somebody else feel less alone in that experience that you're having, I think. So it is both selfish because you're saying my experience matters. And it's also unselfish because you want to say, you are not alone and we are all in this sort of human journey together. And the reason that I want to be a bestseller is not for the money or for the whatever, although of course I like the money. Mom needs dermal filler and money pieces and whatever, but I mean, and life, like expenses, but really it's the more the book sells, the more people it will reach. And that is the whole point. Like you write to connect, right?
and also, I think a lot about storytelling and, um, the whole role of storytelling in our society, and not just novels, but, TV series. And there are some TV series that are as great as the best novels that
Mhm.
I admire deeply. Happy 25th anniversary Sopranos, by the way. And,
Oh my God, seriously?
yeah, it might be time to rewatch it.
Oh,
Um
it's always time to rewatch The Sopranos. Where's the fucking gabagool? Oh my God, it's amazing.
She's my grandma. I
Like,
want some sweet. Oh my
Jesus
god,
Christ, what the bleep already? Yeah, totally. It's every day. It's like the opposite of life yoga, what they're doing, and yet I love it so much.
I love it
Yeah,
so much.
that's amazing.
Yeah, but maybe it is life yoga because maybe life yoga I love that I've co-opted my sister's phrase without fully knowing what it means, but, sorry, Susan. I feel like it's care, like Suzanne Finnemore just said, like, when she's taking care of people, she feels like it's life yoga. I agree. I think caring for others, which gets me back to Gladys the orca. And I don't know if you all know who I'm talking about when I mention Gladys the orca, but she is like the matriarch of the seas. She's like there's an amazing essay that everyone should read about climate change and menopause in Harper's.
Yes. Oh my God.
You know the one I'm talking about? Caitlin Greenidge tweeted it out, but it's not, I don't think it's by her. But anyway, and I wish I could remember who it was by and what it's called, but it's a profoundly good essay. It's the one I wish I had written around this book, around Welcome Home Stranger, because I feel like it gets at so many of the same ideas that I was thinking about when I was writing it, but about how older women have a particular role. And it's not about ego. It's about sort of taking a back seat and giving what you know and giving your energies, which you still have a lot of, even though you are not fertile anymore, to the younger generations, and sort of fostering a sense of continuity, whether you have kids or not. There are younger people all around us, and so for me, that's sort of the answer that I came to in writing this novel. That it's a good thing, it's an important thing, and it's a very particular. It's like the grandmother or auntie or female elder, and so I started thinking elder. I don't mind the word crone, but I prefer the word elder. I think it's a better descriptor of how it feels. Um, Although I do like the witchy overtones of crone.
You can have crone. I will take elder. I'll take the elder. I'll take the wise. a wise, hot person. I don't know. I'm too vain for the. I think the crone has like because I write so much from like German fairy tale lore. Like I don't want to be that person with the giant wart. Like I just don't.
Baba Yaga.
Bobby, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. I'm gonna read like some of the comments because this is such a meaningful discussion for many of our audience. We're getting these great comments. One of them is from my friend Michelle Martin, who is a historian. And she said, as a postmenopausal, childless professional woman, this conversation gets me in all the feels. Women are held to such ridiculous standards of beauty and physical appearance. Sorry, we just covered you up with Michelle's comment.
Oh no, I want to see it. Can you put it back up?
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah. If Karen, if you could throw that back up, that would be great. When I started perimenopause and menopause, I was a PhD student working hard and surrounded by younger women in a dog-eat-dog academic program. I felt like I was the odd woman out, but when the proverbial shit would hit the fan and they could not handle the rigors of grad school, I was. So I feel like that, there is a way in which time giveth, even as it taketh away, which I think is hopefully what Michelle said. Like I'm, kind of paraphrasing this for her. And I like being an elder. I don't mind that. I also don't miss, I have great ambition and I always will. And one great thing about being a writer is you can write until you're knock on wood, 100 years old, like it's a sedentary profession and then you get out and hike. But I do
You
think
also don't have to be beautiful, although you are very beautiful. It's writers actually have the sort of professional advantage of being invisible behind a
yes,
book.
we are supposed to be invisible. My agent actually used to scold me when she saw me doing my vanity thing before events where I would like put on my lipstick and, and she would say, you're a writer. You don't actually have to do this. You could just show up in like jeans and a t-shirt. You don't have to go through the whole thing. And I would say, well, if readers take time out of their lives to watch me do something, I'm going to like at least like clean up a little bit for them. And if it's a big audience, I'm going to do the hair. I'm going to have like the big bouffant, like whatever. So anyhow, but I just feel like that is the thing. I feel like Welcome Home Stranger is a very optimistic book. Like we've been talking about two things. We've been talking about a sort of mixed bag of like the Elizabeth Bishop kinds of things that you lose as you go through life, like the art of losing. You have to master that. And at the same time, never losing a sense of joy and wonder and looking for what you gain as you lose. Would you call Welcome Home Stranger an optimistic book for your audience?
Yes, I think that it goes through the darkness, and that was deliberate. And I was surprised at the end. I was surprised by the way it ended, and I don't want to give away the ending because I don't. I feel like most people haven't read it, but I do. I felt as the writer of the book, I felt a real uplift at the end of it that I hadn't expected, and I hadn't expected that particular kind. I hadn't. It surprised me. She surprised me after I threw all this shit at her, and into the fan of her life. She's a Mainer. She's from Maine, which is a really particular place. Mainers are tough and pragmatic and adaptive and unsentimental. And there isn't a lot of ego in Maine. There's a lot of community and there's a lot of sort of sense of history and a very particular geographic personality, I guess I would call it, that she comes out of. And I think the fact that she is a Mainer is what the ending is all about. And it's a kind of homecoming I had not anticipated for her. And that's all I'm going to say before I, give the whole thing away. But I do think when I think about the book, when I think about Rachel, I should tell you that when it was 500 pages, I had written a year and a half past that ending.
Wow. Okay, cool. Oh my gosh. I would love to know. Like, I hope it's on your website or there's a sequel or something because I'm so fond of her. Like, I want to know what happens. But I do think you ended it at exactly the right
Thank you.
moment. Exactly the right moment. It's like when Erica Jong at the end of Fear of Flying left her heroine in a bathtub being reborn kind of thing. And of course, you want to know what happens. And of course, she wrote sequels. But I think sometimes leaving somebody on the threshold of something is exactly the right way to end something.
I felt like in this case it was because the whole year and a half that I wrote past that was really boring. I mean, it was sort of like, yeah, okay, so what? And so, I mean, enough at the end to be able to understand what's gonna, yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
so thank you for saying that. It took 4 drafts to get there.
Really interesting. So you don't always know the ends of your books before you start them.
And by you don't always, you mean you never.
Do you never know? Do you never
I
know?
never know.
I actually I always know. I always know the last line. I literally know the last line, and then I only have to write 800 pages farther to get to the reward of that like, I'm writing toward it all the time like somebody's swimming in an ocean
Oh my
because it
god.
surprise you.
That must save you so much time.
Oh, hell no, it doesn't, because getting there, I, like, swim around the entire circumference of the
Right.
globe to get to that one spot that I saw, like, 5 feet away. That's what writing is, it
Yeah.
surprises you all. Whether the ending surprises you or the middle surprises you or the beginning, like, it always surprises you. It shape shifts all the time, but so you never know the lines that you're writing toward.
No, I know the question I'm asking, I know who's asking it, and I sort of know I like kicking off some trouble at the beginning of books and, making something in sight, the beginning of like the Big Bang, which we don't
Mhm.
know what caused that, but it feels like the Big Bang to start a book, like a whole universe out of nothing. And you're sort of and the beginning of a book needs to contain all the matter of that universe that you've created, and then after the book is finished, it needs to keep expanding in the reader's imagination. So there's a whole mechanism of starting a book, um, that that I've talked about a lot, but I have never really talked about finishing a book. Like, how do you know when it's done? How do you know when the ending is? And often with a book, I'll finish it and I'll know the ending is right, and it's like I burst into tears. It's like a brain sneeze. It's like I'm oh my god, it's done. It's like cutting the book off my head and it floats off into the world. It's this really profound. But with this book, I never got that feeling until the draft that is the draft that was published, until this ending. And then I was like, that is the ending. And I need that feeling. I need that internal kind of letting go of the book. This like almost like cutting the balloon loose from my head and letting it float off. It's exciting and moving to me to let that go. Do you
Sure.
feel that way at the end? Knowing the ending, do you still get that feeling?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. I feel like it's a very profound experience to get. Like, I just had got goosebumps from what you described. I am never wrong about the way the book ends or the line that ends it. I've never changed my lines, but I feel the simultaneous sense of the great poignancy of withdrawing from the universe that you described, because a book is like a universe that comes out of nowhere, out of a line, out of an image, out of an idea. Usually mine come out of images that don't leave me alone, and I'm like, okay, and the whole thing unfolds out of there. um, with many years of time and trial and error and structural architecture things and blah blah blah. But the end is so poignant because you know that you're withdrawing from that initial Big Bang version of the universe. I will revise it several more times, but there's nothing like saying like this is now complete. That's amazing. And yet I feel a profound sense of anticlimax. And speaking of childbearing or not, I feel postpartum about it because
Yes.
I've been living in this beautiful place for that many years. And usually it's like months to years, and then I know that I have to let it go. So letting it go is both exhilarating because that's why I wrote it in the first place, but also like tremendously hard because from that moment, even with the first draft, it doesn't belong to me anymore.
Exactly.
It's just like, oh,
Exactly.
I'm a baby. So it's like that is a kind of, I sometimes think if I'd had kids, I never would have written because I feel like the energy that I give to the books is what I would have given to my human children. It's so involved, it's so enmeshed.
It
So
is a mothering. I feel like I have to attend to my book every day when I'm working on it, or like a Tamagotchi. What are those little, online those pets that die if you don't so it feels to me like a living thing that I have to feed, like a sourdough starter or, something I have to be there every day or it withers and dries up, and it takes me forever to get back in. And so, advice I give my students is, of course, write every day, but also this ambition to publish. I remember my first novel, and I don't know if you felt this way too. I feel like it's like your first baby. And again, I love this parallel between mothering and writing, because I feel it too. And I feel like my books are my children, and, I've brought them into the world and they came out of me like, who was it Athena who came out of Zeus's head? Or was it,
Yep.
it was Athena,
Yep.
not Artemis? I know, I always mix that up. So yeah, they're like, they're my brain children. They're like my, progeny. Brain. But what was I just going to say? I had some point I was going to ask you.
About, if you can ask me anything, AMA with Jenna and Kate. We were talking about the letting go of books, and you were talking about your first publication, and did I feel X?
Did you feel with your first novel? I feel like I'll never get that back again. When I wrote In the Drink, I was in my 20s. I lived in New York. I was poor. I had a bad relationship with a boyfriend who was never there. I lived in the East Village in a studio apartment on an air shaft. And I was exactly as you described yourself. When you were young, I was just a volcano of anxiety and ambition and yearning. And, just like, I wanted this life that I have now. This is what I wanted in my 20s, but I didn't see a way to get it. I didn't have any money. I didn't have, nothing. I wasn't published. I was turning 30. I wasn't married. There were all these things I wanted to accomplish that I hadn't accomplished. And yet I had my novel. And so someone would say, "How are you?" And I would say, "I'm writing a novel." Like it couldn't convey, like, that is how I am. This is who I am. I'm writing a novel. I hadn't published it. It wasn't finished. It wasn't even good. But the fact that I was writing it, that was what I had. And so I was in love with my first novel, and I was alone with it. And I would wake up at 6 a.m. and I would make a pot of tea, and I would get out my little word processor. And this is 1990, I don't even remember, mid-90s. And I would just work on it until it was time to go to my temp job. And then I'd go to my temp job, and I had a notebook, and I would walk there, and I would like take notes and look at the city and feel fed and feel like, this glorious kind of inspiration, reading with Edith Wharton, collecting words, going to the library, bringing home a stack of books, reading them all in the bathtub, getting out and writing, just this whole world of the book. And it was all I cared about. And it was all I was. I was like this walking, like, vibrating, excitement about In the Drink. And when I finished it and it got published, that feeling was gone forever. You never get that back. It's not the same with subsequent books. I still am a vibrating ball of excitement about writing, and et cetera, but there's always the knowledge that I have this other persona that inhabits alongside the writing persona. It's the public writer persona. And I didn't have that yet. And it takes a while to sort of when my book came out and I did my first interviews, I was I'm going to say idiot, but I was young. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to handle talking publicly about my work. I had no clue. I had to say really embarrassing, regrettable things in order to sort of learn that, oh yeah, I'm really bad at talking about my work. I need to get better at it. But at the beginning, I just was in a world of Edith Wharton and Jane Austen and, all the great books I loved. And those were my companions when I wrote my first book. I don't know if I explained it well, but I'm wondering if you felt the same about your first book.
You did, yes. How am I supposed to even top that or respond to it in any adequate way? It is a very tender and poignant time of life, I think, writing your first book, especially if you do it in your 20s. And I know many of us watching may be writing our first books in our 50s or 60s, equally tender and poignant. But I think your life intersects then with your work in a way that when you're 20 and you have the luxury of living in a garret and doing nothing else, so you don't have children, you don't have aging parents, you don't have those responsibilities or a sense of yourself as a professional in a different context, or a wife, or a husband, right? A dog parent, even. All I was doing at that age, yes, was writing a book. And I was living in a walk up on Beacon Hill, and my neighbors controlled the thermostat and they liked it cold. So I was writing in fingerless gloves in the winter and like a hat, like a Dickensian orphan. I mean, it was like nuts. But I remember walking to teach at one point, because I did kind of what you did, except I did different hours. I would teach during the day, and then I would come home, take a nap to give myself a demarcation point. and separate from the work world and the writing world. And then I would start writing at 10 at night. And then I would write until 4 in the morning, smoking 8 packs of cigarettes and like drinking Tab until I threw up. And then I would get up and start teaching again in the morning. And I was in love with that book. And I also, because my first book, Those Who Save Us, was about a German woman who's having an affair with a Nazi. It was a very grim book. And so I felt grim with the determination to get this book out into the world because I knew it was the best thing I could do. It was the first book I had published. It was not the first book I had written. And so I felt like the grim reaper of literature all the time writing that book for 3 years. I was like, if I don't get this goddamn book published, I'm going to move to Nebraska and become a waitress. And I knew that I probably wouldn't do that. But, you know, it was like, it was a very fully sold, orchestrated endeavor. And I remember walking to teach at one point at Grub Street. I was teaching a novel class then, as I am now. And it was May, and I had spent 3 years working on the book, and I was getting right toward the end of it, like right at the end of that first draft. And the cherry blossoms were in bloom here in Boston and on the Common. And I remember walking and almost crying while I was walking because I was having this ecstatic experience of almost having to let go of this thing that I had spent so much time and energy on and love. And the blossoms, I like went home and put them in the book like immediately. So, and that was kind of how it felt to me, like getting to the end of that book, is like everything became the fodder for this orchestral thing that dominated my life that I loved more than anything in the whole world. And honestly, you know, subsequent books I have loved and engaged with. You love all your books, but I think you're right. Once you splice in your professional understanding of what happens to your books, you're always shepherding them through the world in a different way. Instead of just giving to them creatively, you're also thinking, well, like, how can I get this book into the world so it reaches readers, or how can I market it, or should I change this to appeal to more people, or whatever. It is a little bit of a permeability that the first book didn't have. And the book that I'm working on now, which is what I call the thriller not thriller, because according to our friend Mark, the thoughtful bro, it doesn't have enough plot twists to really be a thriller. But like this book, I also feel in love with in a way where I am now aggravated if I have to take time away from the desk. It's why I'm in my study today and not in my library. Like, I'm like, I need to write up to the last minute, even wearing like a t-shirt. I'm like, I don't have time to change my shirt. The baby.
You were writing, you were writing up until 5 minutes before our interview started. So
Basically.
Thank you for pulling yourself out of the book to come and talk to me.
No, thank you for that. This feeds me. This absolutely, the writer talk feeds me. Like this part of the Blaze, I think it signifies the best of what we do, which is to sink a taproot down into the actual writing itself and remind us why it's important outside of all the noise and the publishing, and which I also love, and the marketing, which I love too, because I'm a marketing hoe and all, you know, all of those things. But it's like these conversations are the purity of what we do and why we do it. And you have like given us so many examples of why it's so important and helped me. I just love talking to you. I feel so much inspiration and invigoration from this conversation. We have a couple of questions. I've kept you for literally an hour. Oh my God, how awful.
Oh God, how is it an hour?
I don't know, but like everybody who is watching this, thank you for bearing with us while Kate and I like make love eyes at each other. And thank you. Let's do a lightning round of questions if you don't mind. And if Karen could throw a few up. Do either of you keep a dream journal? Renee wants to know. No, I don't either.
I did in my psychology class at Reed College. I kept a dream journal. It was really, really, really interesting. So that's an interesting question.
It is. I keep a journal, and they're not all shiny. This one happens to be shiny. It's from Target.
It is shiny.
Shiny, and I write in it in Sharpies. You know, I write every day before I actually write to sort of clear the pipes. But I think what happens is that when I wake up in the morning and I'm working on a book, the book is already there when I wake up, right? I don't know if this happens to you.
Same. Me too.
It's there. And that's why I'm like, I just need to get down, walk the dog, don't talk to anybody outside, because I want to get to the desk and write down that stuff.
I can't talk before noon. I don't like to talk. I don't like to see anyone. I also use my dreams. I use my sleep to work on questions I have in my book. So it's not a dream journal, but I use dreams. I use the sleeping process as a kind of problem solving creatively. And I think it works.
I think that's right. I
Someone
sometimes
just asked,
sorry, go ahead.
there was just a really interesting question that flashed up about, yes, that.
Oh, Renee, you are on with the questions. Have you ever been told that you're selfish because you never had biological kids? I have been, and that's okay with me. I'm just me. That is a great and candid question.
No, no, I don't think it's a comment I've heard a lot. I think it's just sort of people get to know me and see me and they're like, oh, right, you don't have kids. Maybe because I'm so inherently selfish that nobody has to tell me, or maybe because I headed off at the pass by saying, I'm very selfish about my time. That's just the way it is. And no, I can't do that. I have to work. But having kids was a real question for me. I really, really wanted them very badly. And like you, Jenna, I feel like I would have been a great mother. Well, I don't know. I mean, I would have had really interesting kids. I think they would have been, it would have been it's an experience I didn't get to have. And instead I wrote a lot of books. And I don't think you have to choose. I think people with kids write great books. And it's just a different life completely. But the fact that I didn't have them isn't a source of regret at all in any way. It's a source of actual sort of joy. And it's just, why not be happy with what you have? It's the Pollyanna again. It's like, why not be joyful about not having had kids? Because I became an adult in so many other ways, and I've fulfilled myself in so many other ways. And my life is so full, even without kids, that I don't, that's not really your question. That's just me musing about having kids versus not. What about you, Jenna?
I have so many responses to that question. And the first is to tell Renee that I feel bad and angry on her behalf that people were rude enough to call her selfish for making a really difficult choice in a society that expects women to have kids and often defines women by whether or not they have kids still, like especially our generation, I think. So I'm sorry that happened to you, Renee. I have not been told that I'm selfish. I have been told not directly, but like obliquely, like you don't know what love is until you have children.
Oh,
That to me is very
God, I
problematic.
hate that. I mean,
because I think, yes, you are correct. I will never know what that particular kind of self-sacrificial love is. And I will not know that kind of love. And I know that it is exponential. Like I understand this, and I understand also that I'll never know, in the same way that I'll never be an author of color. I'll never be a man. I'll never know certain things. But I think I love very, very deeply and loyally and intensely. And I love many, many things. Like I love you and this and writing and trees and my dog and other things. Hopefully I show up for that. Like I love food. Like I am here to love and to share love with writing. And so that is something that I've heard that initially was hurtful. And then I just thought, you know what? I am acknowledging, like, you're right. I won't know how to love a child because I never had a child in that way, but I love a lot. And I think you probably do too. And so
I love that answer. And how can it be selfish not to have kids? You have so much other energy to give the world that you're not giving to your own kids. Why is that selfish? I don't understand that. I just don't.
I don't know. I don't think so either. But I love what you said about being happy with what you have. And I think because I've already kept you over an hour, we should end with that, because what could be better than that? But I also want to say we had other good questions in the chat, including how you met your husband who's 20 years younger. So I will ask you guys to go, okay, maybe if you could do this in like a 30-second last answer, but that's not going to be as fun as like the hour-long answer.
30 seconds. I met him in New York 2 weeks after I left my first husband. I wasn't ready to meet anyone else. I've written a lot about it. You can find it. I wrote an essay in The Guardian about how we met. We've been together 15 years. We're married, and we could not be happier together, both of us. And our age difference it's the least of anything between us. We're equals. We adore each other. That's 15 seconds.
That was amazing. I love you. Again, you pack a lot into a small space, as you did with this book. And I especially love this because I don't remember where I saw it, but it was an article. It might have been in Harper's or The Guardian or The Atlantic about age difference between men and women and what people thought was appropriate per generation. And the
I
first
saw
line
that.
of this was just like, you know, men always go for women in their 20s, no matter how old they are, and the women
Yes.
evaluate differently. And I was like, I'm not actually reading that because I refuse to believe that. I literally refuse to believe it. But what I did do
It's
is
not
read the comments, and the people in the comments were all women, and they're like, I live with a guy who's 30 years younger, and believe me, my life is rocking. You know? So I was like, mazel tov to you for being an inspiration to all of us before we even knew that we needed it. It's so great. Thank you for like, this honestly was like such a wonderful booster shot of creativity and of writing talk and of life talk, like real ass life talk. Thank you. So you guys go buy Welcome Home Stranger because it is the literary equivalent of this conversation. Like, it deals with so many things that are complicated and difficult and leaves you like feeling refreshed at the end because you're going to come away with like this great realistic positivity, not toxic positivity, but just like genuine happiness about like what we gain as we go through our lives, even as we give other things away, or life takes other things away. So Kate, thank you. Thank you for
Thank you,
being
Jenna. I'm going to hurry up with my next book so I can come back and talk to you some more. This is so much fun. Thank you so much.
Anytime, girl. Yeah, you don't have to write another book, but we'll have you back on when you are. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a great weekend. Don't forget to buy several copies of this book, and thank you for joining us.